Hello everyone and welcome to Total Quilter Monthly for June 2018. My name is Mark Garetz and I'm a National Floriani educator, and this month we're going to be going over a really cool and fun tool in the software called the Magic Block Creator. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, one thing I want to warn you about before we get into the Magic Block Creator is that you don't want to sit down and start playing with the Magic Block Creator unless you have a lot of time on your hands. So you don't want to do it 10 minutes or 15 minutes before you need to leave the house for an appointment, or if there's something you need to do that's time sensitive, because once you get started playing with the Magic Block Creator, as you'll see here in just a second, it can really take a lot of time away from you because it's just so much fun, and the things that you can create with it are literally endless. And like I said, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about here in just a second. So let's get started playing with the Magic Block Creator. Now, it's located right here. Here's the Magic Block Creator icon. When you click it, you're going to get the Magic Block Creator window. Now, there's a lot of things going on here, so let's just kind of start with the basics and we'll work up. So what the Magic Block Creator does is it takes an input image, which is in this window over here, and then depending on what method or mode you have selected down here, it creates a new output image that's kind of like a kaleidoscope of what the input image is and the area in here that you've selected with the input image. Now, how do you get an input image in the first place? Well, when you first start up Magic Block Creator, if you've never played with it before, this is going to be blank. But the first time you start to play with something, it's going to remember the last thing you played with and bring it up, just like it did here, because I was last playing with this image. To load in an image, you come here to this icon, Open Image, and click it, and it's going to open up a standard Windows directory search function to allow you to navigate anywhere in your computer to find an image. Now, the default, it's going to open up in the Magic Block directory, which we have created for you with a bunch of magic blocks that have already been created. And some look like traditional quilt blocks, like this one here, the basket that I've been working with, but others are ones that have been created using the Magic Block Creator with a variety of inputs. And when you save a magic block, it'll go into this library folder here. Now, we can start with any block, and we've started with this basket block, so I'm just going to click it again and click Open. If you want to navigate to someplace else in your computer, you can use these icons over here, or you can use these icons over here to navigate around. Now, we'll do some of that in just a bit. So let's go ahead and open that one, and it's the same as what we had here, so you're not seeing any changes. Now, these icons down here, these simply show you the view of this image. So this shows it to you 1-to-1, so that would be in approximately real size. This one is zoomed to fit, which is what I've got clicked right now, so I can see the whole image in this window. And you can zoom in or out with the plus or minus by clicking these and by using the little slider control here. So for example, if I click plus, you can see it zooms in. If I click minus, you can see it zooms out. And this allows you to get finer control over your selection box, which is this area right here. To change that area, you can first of all move it around when you see that the cursor looks like this four-headed arrow like you see it now. So I can move this to a new area, and you'll see when I do that, my output image changes. Now, this doesn't look very exciting right now because I'm zoomed in on it. We'll come back to that in a second. But you can also change the size of this area either up or down by clicking and dragging on one of the corners. Right, so you can do that. You can use any corner. You can't click on the sides. It's got to be a corner, but you know you're in the right place when your cursor changes to that double-headed arrow there instead of the quad-headed arrow. So if I click and drag my mouse now down, I change this input area, and then of course I can move it all around. So that's the basic idea of this input area over here, but the fun comes in this output area. Now, what you're seeing here is a magnification of my output, and the method that's automatically selected here is style number 2, which is this second selection box here, but you can select any of these down here. And we'll look at the variations here in just a second. But to look at what my actual output block looks like, I would click this icon right here, zoom to fit. And you can see that's what my output blocks looks like. So let's just leave it right there for now, and let's just try making some variations on this without changing my method down here. So if I move this up into the corner up here, you can see I get that block. Now that's a pretty cool looking block. So I might want to actually go and save that. But before we move this around anymore, let's take a look at the different methods down here. So this one looks just the same because of the way it's reflected. And this one's also going to look just the same, again, because of the way it's reflected. Now we're going to start to see some variations. And if I scroll through these, or click through these rather, you'll see the variations in the output here. And you can see I've got some really wild variations depending on the mode or method that I choose down here. Now let's go back to this one here, and we'll talk about this last one here in a second, or the first one actually. So we'll talk about this one right now. So if I move this around a little bit to pick up some more colors in a different area, you can see that I've got a change in what my output looks like. Now that I've moved this out of the corner, you can see that these two will look a little bit different. So you can see they look a little bit different than this one. If I resize it and move it even more, so let's just make it bigger to pick up that area here, and let's kind of move it, oh, I don't know, right there, let's say. Let me go back to zoom to fit. You can see now here I've got more variations. Now with this input image, you're not seeing a lot of changes here, yet you are over here. So you can see I've got some vastly different images over here. And why you're not seeing much variation here has to do with the symmetry of what I've got selected. So if I go to an area where it's not very symmetric at all, you'll see that these three now look entirely different. And again, so do these. So you can see how that works. And this is just using a standard input quilt block as a output, right? So this is a standard basket block, and you can see even with the standard basket block, I've got a lot of different variations. So I actually like the way this block looks. That looks kind of like a fun block to maybe actually piece together. You know, I don't have any connection in here, but if I was doing this traditionally, that would be an issue. But if I made this an appliquilt block, I could actually make this block just like it looks. So I could save this as an image and then go back into the software and create an appliquilt block out of it. And we've covered that in other lessons, so you can go back and take a look at how to do that. So let's take a look at how to save this block. Now, if I come here and click Save, I have three options. I can save it as a magic block, which is going to put it in my magic block library. I can save it as a magic block repeat, which will save it as a repeating pattern. I can also save it as a fabric swatch that would allow me to load this into my other parts of the quilt software, either as a fabric background for the quilt block, a piece of the quilt block, or an applique. And we've also taken a look in other lessons about how that works. So these are my three options. But right now, let's just save this as a magic block. So I'm going to click Save, and you can see here it's saving it in the magic block library, and the default is a JPEG format. So let's just call this, I don't know, we'll call it Mark's block after me, because I made it, and we'll click Save. And now that's part of my magic block library. And you have seen in other lessons, but I haven't really talked about it, when you load in a backdrop, one of the options is to load it in as a regular backdrop or load it in as a magic block, which is just a shortcut way of getting to that magic block library. And then you could load this in as a backdrop in order to convert it into a standard quilt block or an appliquilt block. So that's how you would use that function. Now, let's take a look at some other fun things we can do with this, because we are not limited to the magic block library for images. So let me just click open here, and I'm going to go use the up arrow here to go up one level, and I'm going to go to my images library. I didn't click that right. Hold on. There we go. To my images library, and you'll recognize this as the standard background images library that we give you with the software for you to play with. And you can choose any of these images to play with. Now, it might not seem like these are going to make very interesting things, but actually they will. So let me, for example, just choose this flag image here. And I'm going to click open, and that's going to bring that in. And you can see right away that I've got some very interesting variations on that flag. If I just simply move this around, I'm going to get a lot of different variations on it. If I really want to see that star, again, let me click the zoom to fit so you can see it. I can see portions of that star in there. If I want to make sure I see the whole star, I can make sure I get the star into my input image selection. But if I don't want to see the star, if I just want to see this pattern without stars, I could just move off the star even just a little bit, and I can see a little bit of the star here and maybe a little bit there, and it still looks kind of star-like. But if I get here, you can see now it's no longer looking all that star-like, and you can see I've got a lot of different variations on it. And again, if I just come over here to the red part and maybe part of the blue part here, and let's change the size of this down, and let me just click to make sure I've got everything in there. You can see now I've got parts of that blue in some of these, not all of them, but you can see all of the different variations I have here. Now, I didn't talk about this one, so let's look at style number one. What style number one does is it just takes the area and doesn't reflect it at all. So if I wanted to create a quilt block that, just looked like that with waves, or maybe just the star area like that, I could, but the fun comes in these reflections here. And again, I can change the size of this to see any kind of thing I want. You can see there's something that doesn't look anything like the block. And again, here's something that doesn't look anything like the input image either. Again, let's move off the star for a bit, and so we don't see it very star-like. And let's just take a look at this pattern right here that I've got on the screen right now. That looks kind of interesting. What would this look like repeated over and over again, say for a quilt that used this pattern, or used it as a piece of fabric, which is another really cool thing that you can do with the Magic Block Creator, which we'll talk about in a second. So let's use this one, or, tell you what, let's use this one. Let's see what this one looks like. I kind of like the way that looks. Let's see what it looks like repeated. In order to do that, I simply click repeat here, and then I can zoom out to see what that looks like as a repeated pattern. So that's just what it looks like. And then if I save it, if I come up here and click save, and I click save magic block repeat, it's not going to actually save it like this. It's going to save a repeat of 4 sections so that we can then use that to make fabric. Again, we'll talk about that in just a second. And so I would do that as save magic block repeat. And that's going to save it in a different location in your Documents folder under Floriani called Magic Block Repeat. So you would find it there, and if I click Save, you'll see that I've saved a few things in there as well. So I'm just going to click Cancel because I don't really want to save that. So that's what this repeat does, but what does this grid size here do? This grid size actually lets you change the number of repeats within a block. So the difference is that the Magic Block Repeat saves the pattern over and over again, mainly for making fabric out of it, and this grid size puts it all inside the block if you wanted to make a block out of it that has the repeated pattern in it. So if I wanted this repeated 2 by 2, I could go 2 and 2, and then I'd get this 2 by 2 repeat of that pattern. If I do this, that's what that looks like. And you can see here that it looks pretty much the same as my repeat, when I did this repeat function here, but if you look at some of my other modes, now you can see that it looks entirely different. Okay, so I can do those. I could do this one. Again, that looks pretty symmetrical, but something here, it's not looking all that symmetrical or here. So we can then apply a repeat to that and zoom out and see what that would look like as a repeated pattern fabric. So you can see all the fun that you can have with this. And by the way, you're not limited to images like this. You can pick an image of your granddaughter or your dog and get all kinds of interesting kaleidoscope results out of it. Now, the last two things I want to show you is the colors selection down here. So if you click that, you have a color selection box, and there are 4 different checkboxes. One is hue, so that's the color. Luminance, that's kind of like the brightness of the colors, and saturation is how saturated or how intense the colors are as opposed to bright. And then lastly, you have an option for black and white. So black and white's easiest to understand. Let's click that so we can see what that looks like. And it's a live preview, so as you play with this, you can see the output over here. So there's black and white. I'm going to uncheck that. Let's do hue and see what that looks like. So when I do hue, you can see it changes the base color. So I no longer have red, white, and blue. I have weird pinks and blues and white. And if I change the slider to a different area, you can see that as I do that, it changes what the colors are in that block. And sometimes it looks fine, and other times it looks not so great. But you can choose that. If I uncheck that and I check luminance, you can see what the effect of that is. So if I come over to the lighter side of it, you can see that it really lightens it up. And if I come to the darker side of it, you can see that it's really going to darken up that image a lot. I'm going to uncheck that. Let's take a look at what saturation does. If I click saturation, I can make the colors less saturated, which I'm going to have to move a lot in order for you to see that. In fact, I'm not even seeing that because this is actually making them more saturated. I'm sorry. So if I come to less saturation here, you can see that now the colors look washed out. And there's a difference between that and luminance. The difference can sometimes be kind of subtle, but as you play with this, you'll see. Now you can combine these, so I'm not limited to one, so I can change the color balance here. Let's come over here into more of the reds and oranges, and then let's change the value of saturation to make it less intense or more intense, so you can see how these work here. So you can play with those. I'm going to uncheck all of them to go back to our normal colors and click close. So I want to show you one other cool thing, and that is the play button. Now the play button actually gives you a whole bunch of random variations automatically, and you can see how it's changing both the orientation of where this is and the mode. Okay, so it's creating different patterns for you, and when you get to one that you like, you can click stop. Like if you like that one, you can go ahead and click stop. These little 3 ellipses right here, these are the play settings. So if you click those, you can tell it whether you want to change the size of the selection and the method, the hue, the luminance, or the saturation. So it can vary all of these things. So let's just choose size and method, both of those, and click OK. Now when we play, it's going to change a lot of different factors all at once, and you can see that I've got a lot of different variations. I'm going to stop it because this will look a little bit better if I turn off the repeats and do a zoom to fit. So let's just click play, and you can see all the different variations I get here. All right. So that is the Magic Block Creator, and like I said, it's got so much you can do with it. You'll have so much fun with it that it's going to just be a real time sink. You're going to sit here and just play and play and play and lose track of the rest of the day. So again, don't play with this tool unless you got a lot of time on your hands. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is getting custom fabric made, because there's a lot of services out there now where you can take your output image, especially if you save it as a repeat, and you can send it to them and they will make custom quilt blocks for you, or actually quilt fabric rather, for you, printed onto real quilt cotton or any other kind of material that they have available. And it's not all that expensive compared to high quality quilt cotton, but you will get your custom fabric pattern made with the Magic Block Creator. So that's a lot of fun. One of the services that the software is set up to create the output image for exactly would be Spoonflower. So you can check them out at spoonflower.com and get your custom fabric made. But there are lots of other services to choose from that do the same thing, and they're all kind of in the same ballpark price-wise. And the minimums are actually very, very small. So it's very easy to create your own custom quilt fabric for your project using the Magic Block Creator. Your other option is to save just a block, and if you don't feel like creating it in the software using the AppliQuilt tools or the other tools in the software to create a standard block out of this pattern using the backdrop method or by importing it and tracing it, whatever you want to do, you can actually print this onto fabric using an inkjet printer and the special fabric that you buy to go into an inkjet printer, and make just a single quilt block out of it that you can then sew in to your quilt without actually having to piece anything. So those are all the options that you can do with the Magic Block Creator, and I hope you have some fun with it. So I want to thank everybody for coming and invite you to come back next month for our next installment of Total Quilter Monthly.